Hello, this is Virtualis the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. Well, hello there. So this is the second video looking at the Jaenisch Gambit, and just a reminder, the Jaenisch Gambit comes out from the Ruy Lopez. Ruy Lopez, bishop to b5, immediate attack on the knight on c6. And the Jaenisch Gambit, the immediate and unexpected, f5. And I love this gambit because it's kind of like a reverse Vienna Gambit. Now, in the last video, I talked about two of the most common responses for white. So firstly, if they accept the gambit, what you should do is to push the pawn to e4. And as a reminder, the knight has nowhere good to go because all the squares still on the main board are covered by your pieces. So effectively, the opponent will now have to do something about that knight, and either you potentially win some tempo or you potentially might even win some material. So potentially quite good for black. And if we sort of have a look at sort of the feedback for black, I think this is advantageous. Yeah, so fairly equal, but you know, black has certainly equalized here and a very playable position. Now, the other very common response, which we covered, was they'll decline the gambit with d3. Now, in this setting, what you would do is you would capture, and the goal after this point is, now that you've opened up the F file, is to try to get your knight out, try to get your bishop out, and then short castles, castle kingside, and then the rook will have control over this semi-open F file, which is very, very good as well. Now, what I didn't cover in the last video, which is what happened in the game I played today, is the exchange variation, which is where the opponent exchanges their bishop for your knight. So obviously here you should take back, and very often the opponent will now take that undefended pawn on e5. And so this is part of sort of the very standard of Ruy Lopez. Now, in the actual game, I wasn't actually entirely sure what to do here, and I made a mistake, which I'll cover that game a little bit later. But I'll talk about what is the theoretical best move. And by far, the best move here is queen to d4. And very important to remember here. And this actually gives, it's a very, very nice advantage to black already. And very playable position. The queen now attacks both that pawn and the knight, so the opponent has to do something. So potentially, if they want to defend that knight, they could play f4. And you know, one of the good things here is just natural looking moves are basically the best moves. So if we sort of have a look at the lines here, yep, you can see straight up capture is best. It was one of the best moves. Or you could take this way as well. Either way, however, is fine. So both of those are very natural looking moves. Now, the opponent might opt to choose to move the knight to maybe one of these two squares to get it out of the way. So if they move here, again, logical capture comes with check. A very natural looking move, and it's pretty good for black. Or they might move here. Very, very similar idea. So you can either capture here with check, or you could take with a pawn with another attack on the knight. Either of those are very good moves. Now, there is, however, one tricky move that the opponent might do, because it's particularly sort of in the beginner intermediate level, they're sort of saying, oh, how can I opt to do a threat? And this will be queen to h5 with check. So almost looks like a get out of jail card, doesn't it? But as you can see, this is an illusion for white. This is actually pretty bad for white. Very interesting, according to the Lee Chess database, this is apparently the most common move by white in this position. Why is it bad? Because normally you think in this position it's bad for the opponent, because it looks like if you block, you can capture back with the knight. No, it looks potentially terrible. If you capture back, don't you then capture the rook? Let's see what happens. Defend, capture. take, and because of the position of the queen, it actually is defending the rook. So in fact, the queen cannot take. And, you know, basically it's got a problem. Basically, it's got a problem here. So the queen here might take on sort of g6, and if you look here, all sort of lines actually still end up fine for black. So black is forced to move the king somewhere, but it's still actually completely okay. So a bit scary, but you know, it is still potentially very good for black. So best move here looks like it's moving the king out of the way. The opponent might push a pawn, and then potentially, you know, putting a threat on the queen. So you know, here the queen is basically overextended, and there's no other supporting pieces. It's basically in trouble, and black is fine. So that is how to respond. So remember, with the exchange variation, queen to d4 is by far the best move. Now, what did I actually do in this game? Well, if we have a quick look at the review, what you will see is, you know, I did okay, but, you know, you can see a blunder overall, but definitely I still sort of captured sort of win afterwards. And one of the things is, you know, white rarely will see the Jaenisch Gambit. So potentially they are going to make a mistake. So what I did here, let's put on the feedback and evaluation, is that I took. And you can see that that was a blunder, +3, you know, +3.5, pretty bad. But, you know, it's not all over yet. It's not all over. The opponent now sort of does a short castles, which is, you know, which gives me some of the advantage back. And the problem with that move is, in fact, queen to h5 with check. Now, without the queen, and in d4, there isn't sort of that diagonal defense of that rook a few moves down the line, which is why that is potentially so powerful. Here I did see that issue, so I developed sort of knight f6, thinking that that would defend that square. They sort of decided to push the pawn, so clearly, you know, the opponent isn't quite sure what are the best moves here. Again, I wasn't sure either, so I just decided, yep, let's just capture. This is potentially a sort of a problem because, of course, the knight is now pinned. Here, I thought, let's just go capture another pawn. Queens face each other. What are they going to do? They decide to capture back, moving the queen now off potentially that diagonal, which is you know, very good for me, I thought. Here, I thought I would unpin that knight. Stockfish reckoned directly attacking that knight at this point was better, but, you know, bit tricky. Opponent's potentially still ahead. They capture, which was an error because now I can capture back. Now there's an attack there, and more than that, in the future, there's an attack down that diagonal as well. Opponent makes a queen move, which probably doesn't do a whole lot, which is why it's now -3. I want to get my king out of there, so I decided to do short castles. So that was okay, not the not the best move according to Stockfish. They wanted to trade queens right away. They now do queen c4 with check, and here I'm happy to trade. And if we trade queens, then I get to also undouble those pawns. Very, very good. And now that's attacked, and if they move, I've got an attack there as well. So powerful. They decide to sort of try to move the knight to provide a defense to b2, but now I can develop the other bishop, attacking that knight. They, in vain, try to defend, but that doesn't work because I still take that knight. They can take back, but now I capture. That rook is gone the next turn. Basically, I end up a piece in the end game, which would be completely winning. And here, my opponent opted to resign. Good game, GG. There is one big takeaway from this game. If they exchange their bishop for the knight, then queen d4 is the best move. I hope you found this video interesting, and thanks for watching.